Shadow Slave Chapter 252, Unseen. This was the last secret about the fate of the lost expedition that Cassie had gleaned from her visions. But even then, the knowledge she had received was fragmented and incomplete. All she could tell the members of the cohort was that, once they crossed the Dark River, and until reaching the next boundary, they had to keep their eyes closed at all costs, no matter what happened. No living thing could see what lay beyond these cold waters and remain cold. At least that was what she told them. Cassie didn't really know herself what would happen if someone failed to follow that rule, but said that she had never felt more terror than in the short moment before the vision showing how the fate of the lost expedition had shattered and everything had grown dark. This was telling a lot, considering what kinds of horrors the blind girl saw in her vision routinely. In any case, this was where Sunny came in. While looking through the eyes of the shadow was still too dangerous, he could lead the cohort to their destination with the help of his ability to sense space through the shapes of shadows populating it. At least in theory. Standing on the shore of the Dark River, 6 humans tied the golden rope around their waists. When everyone was ready, Nephis took out 6 strips of cloth and a block of wax. Lighting a small white flame on her palm, she sighed and turned to Effie. "You're first." The huntress made a complicated face, but then obediently approached their leader. What followed next looked simultaneously intimate and disturbing. Using her flames to melt the wax, Changing Star gently took Effie's face in her hands, and after the huntress shut her eyes tightly, sealed them with melted wax. Then, she tied the strip of cloth around Effie's head to hold it in place. One after another, every member of the cohort went through the same procedure. When Sunny's turn came, he shifted slightly when Nephis' cool hands touched his cheeks. A few moments later, he was blind. That is this how Cassie lives? Commanding his shadow to not see anything, Sunny was left in utter darkness. However, he still had it better than the blind girl. His shadow sense was still working, at least. With its help, Sunny could more or less tell what was where. This form of perception was vastly different from sight, but could serve the same purpose in a pinch, be it very poorly, if conditions were right. Luckily, he had practiced navigating the world with the help of nothing else but shadow sense in the past. This was how he had defeated the strange basilisk creature in the Dark City, among other things. Leading the group of staggering humans to the graceful boat, he helped them to board it and untied the rope holding it in place. Then, Sunny found the oar and pulled on it, propelling the boat across the dark river. Soon, cold mist shrouded everything around. The deeper into the mist they sailed, the more it felt like they were leaving one world behind and entering another. A much darker, much more ancient, much more terrifying world. No one felt compelled to speak, so the silence was broken only by the murmur of rushing water and the creaking of the wooden oar. This is not too bad. Yeah. I am not scared witless at all. Calming himself down with these silly thoughts, Sunny continued to guide the boat. However, one thing kept making him shiver. Being surrounded by mist and having to keep his eyes closed, Sunny couldn't help but remember the harrowing encounter with the being that appeared in a veil of fog and tried to lure him into gazing at it using a stolen voice. Was this where it came from? After some time had passed, he couldn't tell how much. No matter how hard he tried, Sunny suddenly sensed a solid mass in the distance. This was the opposite shore of the Dark River. Soon, they were drawing near to it. As the bottom of the boat scraped against stone, Sunny jumped to the pier and tied the rope around the stone pillar. Then, he helped the others disembark. Turning his head, he sensed another shape swaying on the surface of the water. There was a second boat here, presumably the one First Lord and his companions used to cross. But unlike Nephis and the cohort, there had not been an oracle in their ranks. No one had warned them to keep their eyes shut. Maybe this was the reason why none of them had returned. Turning his back to the river with a strong feeling of unease, Sunny faced the mouth of the tunnel that led deeper underground. Letting out a resentful sigh, he slightly tugged on the golden rope and took a step forward. The other members of the cohort had no choice but to follow him. A few seconds later, they disappeared into the tunnel, leaving the shore of the silent river behind. As soon as Sunny stepped into the tunnel, he felt cold shivers running down his spine. Although he couldn't see anything about it, he could tell that it was different from the ones they had traversed earlier. This one still felt like it had been cut through the flesh of the mountains by someone, or something, as opposed to being formed by a natural process. However, its creators were unmistakably different from the humans that had created the mine and the quarry outside. Everything about it was more pronounced, more skillful. The shadows populating the tunnel were different, too. They were much deeper, much darker, and much, much more ancient. Soon, the tunnel turned into a maze of wide passages, all filled with nothing but mist and silence. Another maze. Of course it's a maze. Everything in this damn place just has to be a maze. Before Sunny could finish the thought, though, he suddenly froze, paralyzed by fear. Because right in front of them, he felt the presence of a shadow that was different from all the others. A human shadow. Previous index next. User comments. Write comment. Shadow Slave Chapter 253, Without a Master. The human shadow stood lonesomely in the mist, strangely aloof and motionless. As Sunny pulled on the golden rope to command his companions to stop, it shifted slightly and turned away, then became still once again. Sunny sensed a cold, dreadful feeling settle in his heart. The possibility of encountering another human in this dark and terrifying place was already unsettling enough. He did not consider even for a second that one of the members of the lost expedition could have survived down here, in the darkness, for all these years. Not unless they were no longer human. But even that was not the cause for the coldness and dread he felt. The real reason had nothing to do with logic, and everything to do with his unique aspect. Because of it, Sunny sensed that there was something terribly, utterly wrong with the shadow. The feeling he got from it was one of eerie and utter wrongness. However, it didn't seem to be dangerous or hostile. Instead, it felt lost, empty and mournful. The shadow was full of sorrow and anguish that he could not describe with words. Sunny was not that empathetic when it came to humans, but strangely, he couldn't help but share in the suffering of this lonely shadow. Maybe because, in a sense, they were kin. As he was observing the shadow, unsure what to do, it made a few steps in a random direction, and then stopped hesitantly, lingering there without moving. Then, it walked back and froze once again. It was as though the shadow was lost. A few moments later, Sunny finally understood the nature of the deep feeling of wrongness he felt in the lonesome shadow. When he did, a cold shiver ran through his entire body. The reason why this shadow was so strange and eerie was because it wasn't connected to anyone. There was no human casting it. Not anymore, at least. The human that the shadow had once belonged to was gone, cut from existence by some unknown power. Sunny couldn't sense any bones anywhere, either. It was as if the human had not been killed, but simply erased. While the shadow remained to wander aimlessly in the mist for all eternity. What a terrible fate. But the question remained, what was he supposed to do now? The shadow was in his way. Sunny had to either walk past it, or return back, and try to find another way through the maze. But what threat could this pitiful thing pose? It was just a shadow, after all. His own couldn't harm a fly no matter how hard it tried. This one had to be the same. With a deep sigh, Sunny slowly walked forward. With each step he took, he could sense the lonesome shadow better. At some point, it sensed him, too. Turning to face Sunny, the shadow hesitated for a few moments, then tentatively glided closer. He could feel an outburst of muted emotions radiating from it: surprise, hope, and then, sudden despair. Realizing that he wasn't its long-lost master, the shadow froze. Its shoulders dropped. Sensing the deep well of loneliness, anguish and sorrow in front of him, Sunny tilted his head to the side. Then, following an impulse, he outstretched his hand to the shadow. Here, take my hand. You don't have to be alone anymore. The shadow trembled, as if it heard his silent invitation. Then, it lingered for a few moments and approached him with uncertainty. Finally, it raised its hand and tentatively placed it in the hand of his own shadow. A moment later, it disappeared. Sunny sighed. Your shadow grows stronger. Diving into the soul sea, he walked along the rows of silent shadows standing on the surface of the tranquil water. And there, just as he had expected, he saw a new one. A shadow of a graceful young woman was standing among them, as motionless and still as the rest of them. Her anguish, sorrow, and loneliness were gone. The shadow seemed to finally be at peace. Sunny looked at her for a few moments, his heart heavy. Finally, he said, "Welcome. Rest now. Your nightmare is over." With that, he left the silent sea and sighed again. Standing in the darkness with his eyes sealed shut, Sunny remained motionless for some time. Then, he pulled on the golden rope and led the cohort further into the mist. Sunny didn't know how long they wandered around the dark maze. More than once, he had ended up at a dead end and had to search for another path. It was hard to not lose track of all the turns of the twisting tunnels, but he had somehow managed to stay on track. On the way, he had found 3 more shadows. Each of them was just like the first one, lost and lonesome. And just like the first one, they eventually took his hand and were absorbed into his soul sea. The 4 of them, 1 young woman and 3 men, now stood silently together, united once again even though their masters were long gone. Seeing them together gave Sunny a little solace, no matter how misguided it was. There were 5 stones arranged around the fire at the campsite left behind by the lost expedition, hinting that 5 people had descended into the ancient mine. 4 of them had eventually perished in this eerie, dark place. But no matter how hard Sunny searched, he couldn't find the 5th shadow. The First Lord himself was not here. Could it be that he had somehow managed to survive and leave the maze of mist? At some point, Sunny felt someone pull on the golden rope. Turning around, he walked a few steps back and stopped near Cassie. Feeling his approach, the blind girl raised her hand and pointed at one of the tunnels. Understanding what she wanted to say, Sunny led the cohort in that direction. Soon, the sound of rushing water reached his ears. Some time later, they came to the shore of another subterranean river. They had reached the second boundary. Previous index next. User comments. Write comments.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Shadow Slave Chapter 254, The First Lord. For a moment, Sunny was afraid that they had been walking in circles all this time, and now returned exactly to where they had started. But then, he calmed himself down and noted that this river, while as eerie as the one they had crossed on a wooden boat, was rather different. He couldn't exactly explain it, but it didn't feel the same. Plus, there was no pier with two boats tied to stone pillars anywhere in sight, or rather, sense. Instead, there was a bridge. Sunny could feel its shadow falling on the cold water, solid and firm as the stone it was built from. The bridge arched over the river, leading far into the distance. Not wishing to spend another minute in the terrible maze that no living thing could see if it hoped to remain alive, Sunny led the cohort toward the bridge. If Cassie was correct, they would be safe after crossing the second river. Sunny surely hoped that it was true, because the long journey where he had to play the role of a guide for 5 blind people had been nothing short of exhausting. After spending 7, or was it 8 by now, months on the forgotten shore, Sunny had thought that he possessed a high tolerance for terror. But this last ordeal tested the limits of his mental endurance. Walking through that dark place with his sight taken away, it was a miracle that Cassie had somehow managed to remain sane at all. He tensed up when they entered the bridge, expecting for something dreadful to happen at the last moment. But the silence was not broken by anything except for the sound of rushing water, their steps, and laborious breathing. The cohort walked on the bridge, leaving the dark maze behind. Soon, they could feel the mist surrounding them grow thinner. And at some point, it was gone. They crossed the river without any trouble and returned to solid ground again. Making several more steps, Sunny stopped and finally allowed himself to tremble. Then, he opened his mouth and said in a hoarse voice, "Are we through?" Although Cassie had not said anything about the need to remain quiet, each of them subconsciously avoided speaking ever since entering the mist. Because of that, the sound of his own voice startled Sunny a little. A few moments later, Cassie answered in a hesitant tone, I think so." Without wasting any more time, Sunny untied the cloth that covered his eyes and removed the wax from them. Then, he carefully opened them and looked around. They were standing on a stone shore inside a vast cave, through which the underground river was flowing unobstructed. Some distance away from them, the wall of the cave came down, with the mouth of a wide tunnel visible in it. By his side, other members of the cohort were removing the strips of cloth. Sunny could hear the sighs of relief coming from them. However, his attention was instantly drawn to Nephis, who had already opened her calm grey eyes and was looking at something behind him. Turning around, Sunny followed her gaze and froze. Just a few meters away from them, on the shore of the dark river, he saw a human skeleton. It was sitting on the cold stones, its back straight, facing the water. Unlike the ferocious undead from the catacombs of the Dark City, this one was tranquil and untouched by the corruption of the Forgotten Shore. This was the place where the first lord of the Bright Castle had died. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The young man whom the members of the cohort only knew by his title had died on the shores of the cold underground river, just a few meters away from the bridge that he had used to escape the terrible place which according to Cassie, no living being should have been able to escape. Somehow, he had survived even without knowing that anyone entering the mist had to keep their eyes closed at all times. But in the end, the wounds he had received there, or somewhere up ahead, perhaps, turned out to be too grievous. Before the last vestiges of life abandoned him, the young man, the First Lord, who had wrestled the bright castle from the nightmare creatures, created a safe place for the humans sent to the Forgotten Shore to live, and lead an expedition to find a way out of this cursed place. Sat down and looked in the direction of the misty, dark maze. The place where his friends and companions had died, leaving him alone in the darkness of this forsaken underworld. Looking at the skeletons that sat quietly on the shore of the river, Sunny couldn't help but feel a deep feeling of awe and sorrow. He had never met this young man, but somehow, it felt as though they knew each other very well. Everything that humans had on the Forgotten Shore was thanks to his bravery, power, and skill. What a shame that he had died here, in this lonesome place, with no one to share his last moments and tell the tale of his last deeds. The skeleton was strangely well preserved. It was sitting with its legs crossed, back straight, its hands resting on the hips, as if meditating. The skull of the First Lord gazed at the river with the dark cams of its empty eyes, strangely calm and at peace. What Sunny noticed, though, was not the whiteness of the bone nor the eternal grin of the bare skull, but a thin strip of light metal resting on it like a humble crown. There was a single bright gemstone on the metal band, placed right above the middle of the skull's forehead. After the six of them gathered around the remains of the First Lord and stood there for a while in silence to express their respect for this extraordinary human, Nephis sighed and approached the skeleton. Gently, she took the strip of metal and removed it from the First Lord's head. A moment later, the band suddenly broke into countless sparks of light, which then disappeared, absorbed into her soul core. Sunny's eyes widened. The crown of the First Lord was a memory. Previous index next. Shadow Slave Chapter 255. Dawn Shard. As the last spark of light disappeared, Nephis tilted her head to the side and remained silent for a few moments. Then, she lowered her gaze and said, addressing the First Lord, "Thank you." She hesitated, as though wishing to say more, but eventually just took a step back. Kai, however, wasn't that reserved. Bowing deeply, he remained with his head down for a while, then straightened his back, looked at the skeleton, and voiced something that a few of them must have been thinking. "Thank you. We will finish what you started." His words echoed above the cold water, eventually disappearing into the darkness. A heavy silence settled above the shore of the underground river. A few seconds later, the charming archer turned to the rest of them and asked with uncertainty, "I think, should we bury him?" The members of the cohort looked at each other. Before anyone could voice their opinion, though, Sunny suddenly spoke. "No. Just leave him as he is. He wanted to be closer to his friends when he died, so, just don't touch him." With that, he turned his head and looked away. Since the First Lord died outside of the terrible maze, his shadow was gone, too. Now it was just dumb and empty, like most shadows cast by inanimate objects. He had not shared in the harrowing fate of his companions, which meant that Sunny couldn't help him reunite with them, even slightly. Neither could they bring the remains of the First Lord back outside, to bury him near the girl who had died in the quarry. It was better to just leave him be. Forget about it. Think of something else. Sunny had other matters to consider, anyway. That strange memory that Nephis had absorbed, he had never even heard of a memory that could exist outside of someone's soul. Had the First Lord somehow relinquished the ownership of it, Or was this a quality that all shard memories possess? And it was, without a doubt, another shard memory, just like Effie's spear and his own stalwart blade. That memory was the reason why Changing Star had ventured on this expedition, to begin with. The thing that was supposed to somehow give her a chance of defeating Gunlord. Sunny stared at Nephis, then said, "That headband, what is it called?" "No, actually, let me guess. Dawn Shard. Dusk Shard." Neph looked at him and didn't answer. Her ivory face was calm and inexorable. Sunny grinned. "Full of secrets, are we?" A hint of some deep, sharp emotion appeared in her cold grey eyes. A few moments later, she said, "Weren't you the one who made it clear that you don't want to be a true member of this cohort? You chose to be a hired blade yourself, did you not? Why should I share my secrets with you?" Sunny remained silent for a bit, then sighed. "Well, fair enough. I did, and you have no good reason to share anything with me." Suddenly, Nephis smiled. "You can change your mind, you know. If you do, I'll naturally tell you everything." He stared at her for a while, then shook his head. No need. Answer me one question, though. How exactly is that thing supposed to help us defeat Gunlord? Changing Star lingered for a bit, then simply shrugged. "See for yourself." A moment later, the headband left behind by the First Lord weaved itself from sparks of light on her forehead. The bright gemstone in its center softly gleamed. And then, something about the world around Sunny changed. What? He blinked a couple of times, then slowly lowered his gaze and looked at the fabric of the puppeteer's shroud. Or, rather, on the spell weave beneath it. What he saw left Sunny breathless. The 5 glowing embers that served as nexuses for the complicated pattern of ethereal strings permeating the memory suddenly shone brighter. Much brighter. In fact, their radiance was now almost as intense as of those inside the black onyx armor he had purchased at the memory market. Which was an ascended memory. What the hell? Pulling on the thread tied around his neck, Sunny fished out the blood blossom from under his armor and stared at it, perplexed. The 2 embers inside the intricate pendant had become much brighter, too. Not knowing that Sunny had the ability to peer into the inner weave of memories, Nephis explained. The Dawn Shard possesses a single, but also singularly powerful enchantment. It empowers all memories around it. The area of effect of the enchantment is very large, but the enhancement it provides is ever larger. You don't say. Staring at his memories, Sunny felt as though he was on the verge of being dumbstruck. Singular was the right word to describe the effect of the Dawn Shard. He had never heard of a memory being capable of rising the power of another one by almost an entire rank. Wait, did she say, all memories? All memories, all of them, in a very large radius. Impossible. With that crown on her head, Nephis would not only be able to stand a chance in a fight against Gunlord, but also make each one of her followers so much more dangerous. She would become a perfect general for a small army of Awakened. But wasn't there something wrong with that statement? Sunny frowned. All memories, hold on. All? Glancing at Changing Star, he asked. So that thing makes every memory around you vastly more powerful. Nephis gave him a silent nod. Sunny's frown deepened. Then do you not see a problem here? Won't it enhance that damn golden armor of Gunlord's, too? How exactly does it give you a chance against him, then? She lingered for a few moments, then smiled slightly. It would not, would it? But, hey, do you want me to tell you another secret? Sunny glared at her without saying anything. He knew better than to get himself into such a clumsy trap. Only, as it turned out, there was no trap. Nephis just waited for a bit and continued. It will help me, because the golden armor Gunnalag wears is not a memory. Before he could say anything, she added. In fact, it is an echo. Previous index next. User comments. Write comment. Please read and apply the rules before posting a comment. By sharing your comment, you agree to... Shadow Slave Chapter 256. True Reason. Sunny was silent for a while. An echo, that weird golden armor was actually a copy of some strange corrupted nightmare creature. What kind of creature took the shape of an armor? But then again, the fact that it looked like an armor didn't mean that it was all it could look like. The main trait of the golden armor was that it seemed to be made out of liquid metal. That metal always flowed and moved around, enveloping Gunlord's body like a second layer of skin. The only thing that never changed was the mirror-like surface that served him as a face. It wasn't impossible to imagine that the mass of living metal was, in fact, not a memory, but a bizarre echo. Not impossible, but a bit of a stretch. Glancing at Nephis, Sunny asked, "How do you even know this?" She hesitated for a few moments, then said, "You already know that we have an ally inside the castle. She was the one who told us." That mysterious spy again. Sunny became even more convinced that this person was of a very high rank among the Bright Lord's servants. Only someone extremely close to him would know such an important secret. In fact, Sunny expected that the paranoid tyrant would never let anyone learn of it. Why would one of Gunlord's most loyal minions help his enemy? Was it all an elaborate trap orchestrated by the Bright Lord himself? Looking at Changing Star with a deep scowl on his face, he asked, "Can this ally of yours even be trusted?" If he was right in his guess about the identity of the spy, well, things would become complicated. She was silent for a while, then said evenly, "Trusted? Not really, never, actually. However, we can trust in the information that was provided to us." He raised his eyebrows. "And why is that?" Nephis shrugged and then answered, her voice indifferent. "Because I am the only chance anyone here has of ever getting out of this cursed place. And Gunlord is not." Interesting. So, one of the top ranks of the Bright Lord's forces was an opportunist who desired to return to the real world desperately enough to risk betraying the ruthless tyrant. That person had been loyal to Gunlord because there was no better alternative, but then changed sides once the last daughter of the Immortal Flame clan appeared like a miracle and promised to save the people of the Forgotten Shore. That ally of hers was either swayed by Nephra's rhetoric like the rest of the unfortunate fools in the Dark City, or was confident of ending up among the few lucky people who would actually have the chance of surviving what was about to come. Or just knew something that Sunny did not. In any case, Changing Star seemed to be confident in the information the spy provided, so he did not see the point of doubting it. She wasn't any more naive or trusting than he was, after all. Nephis had learned the art of cynicism from the best. Hai, who had been listening to their conversation with a fair bit of curiosity, suddenly cleared his throat. I am very sorry to interrupt you guys. But I just wanted to ask, since we have found the remains of the First Lord and came into possession of this memory you were discussing, does that mean that the expedition is over? Have we actually accomplished our goal? Really? That, indeed, would seem to be the case. However, Sunny knew better. With a friendly smile, he shook his head. No, buddy, the goal of this expedition has not been achieved yet. The charming archer looked at him with surprise. But, didn't we get the thing that will help us defeat Gunlord? Nephis was staring at Sunny too, a subtle smile on her lips. Yeah, Sonny. What else do we have to do? Do tell. He grinned. Well, it's very simple, really. Yes, you told us that the reason for this adventure of ours was to find the means of overthrowing the Bright Lord, and it certainly was a reason. But it's not the whole reason, is it? Cassie turned her head slightly to listen to him and sighed. Castor's face, meanwhile, had turned grim. Effie didn't seem to care one way or another. Nephis, on the other hand, just smiled wider. What is the whole reason then? Sonny gestured at the mouth of the tunnel in front of them. To finish what the First Lord had started, of course. Kai was looking between him and Changing Star, unsure of what was going on. What do you mean? Exactly. Sonny shrugged. Think about it, Kai. We saw the same map. What were the symbols drawn at the very edge of it, near the place where the First Lord's expedition had disappeared? The charming archer frowned. There were 3 of them. A crown, a question mark, and a red cross. Sonny smiled. Exactly. There were 6 crosses drawn on the map, each marking one of the headless statues. 2 to the east of the Dark City, 1 to the north, 1 to the west, and 2 to the south. We had visited one of the 2 statues situated to the south already. That's where the spider matriarch had weaved her nest. He turned to Nephis and said, his smile gone. So the truth of it all is that the First Lord never really intended to find a way through the Hollow Mountains, isn't it? He wasn't a fool who would do something so misguided. No, he came to this godforsaken place for the same reason that we are here. To find the last statue. Changing Star was silent for a bit. When the silence was on the verge of growing uncomfortable, she suddenly said, "That is correct." Kai stared at her in astonishment. But why? No, wait, what's so important about that statue? Nephis sighed. This is something that people can only volunteer to do. Anyone who doesn't wish to proceed can stay behind and avoid risking their lives in the battle. In fact, some of us probably should. She turned to face the tunnel, remained silent for a bit, and then said, "Yes, somewhere up ahead lies another ancient statue. There will be a powerful creature guarding it. I don't know what that guardian is, exactly, but we have to kill it. Anyone who is willing to fight can join me. Others can stay back and wait for my return." She glanced at the members of the cohort and added, "However, if you do join me, you'll have to follow one simple rule. No matter what happens, it's imperative that you don't deliver the final blow to the creature, unless you have reached and touched the statue first." Previous index next. User comments. Shadow Slave Chapter 257, Nightmare Champion. So that is how it works. Initially, Sonny had suspected that the mysterious shard memories were just rewarded to those who managed to slay certain powerful nightmare creatures, who dwelled close to the headless statues. The truth, however, turned out to be more complicated. The creature itself, most likely, did not even matter. It was the act of vanquishing a powerful foe after coming in contact with a statue that summoned the memory from oblivion. That was why they had received the Midnight Shard, before even learning about how important these ancient monuments were. Sonny, Nephis and Cassie had taken shelter atop the statue of the ancient knight, and killed the carapace demon long after. But no, that didn't make a lot of sense. If this was true, Sonny would have received another shard memory after defeating the Corpse Eater. So, not any powerful abomination would do. Each statue seemed to have a nightmare champion tied to it by some invisible bond. The carapace demon, whom the creatures described as cursed soldiers of the fallen legion used to obey, was connected to the statue of the knight. The Iron Matriarch was tied to the statue of the hunter. Which statue had the Dawn Shard come from? The builder, whose monument had somehow come to life, and was now wandering the forgotten shore. Rumors said that the First Lord chased it around the labyrinth for a long time, after all. But somehow, Sunny felt that the metal headband had nothing to do with the walking colossus. So many questions. How many champions were still around, anyway? Nephis had not even tried to search for one tied to the builder, nor for one tied to the priestess. How many shard memories were already in the hands of humans? Among the members of the cohort, there were now 3. And they were about to challenge some abominable horror for a chance of receiving the 4th one. Why do I even assume that there are only 3? Sunny tilted his head. Indeed, the fact that he had only seen the Midnight Shard, the Zenith Shard, and the Dawn Shard did not mean that Changing Star had not gotten other ones already. Not counting the memory they were currently hunting, 3 more were unaccounted for. How many had she found already? He smiled darkly. Well, it's going to be revealed sooner or later. Right now, however, there is a more pressing issue. Glancing at Nephis, he asked, "What happens if I get the memory?" As you reminded so astutely, I am not one of your lackeys. That would throw a wrench in your plans, wouldn't it? Sunny couldn't imagine Changing Star leaving something that important to chance. However, to his surprise, she just shrugged. "Keep it, if you want." He frowned. Why was Nephis so nonchalant about the possibility of a shard memory falling into his hands? Wait, why was she so indifferent about him already possessing the Midnight Shard? One possible explanation was that it didn't matter who held the shard memory, as long as it was in human hands. The other explanation made Sunny very uncomfortable. Maybe she was just sure that fate would push the 2 in the same direction. If this was true, then it didn't really matter which one of them possessed the shards. He lingered for a bit, then shook his head and said, "Well, what are we waiting for? You didn't really expect any of us to stay behind while others fight, right? Let's go and hunt this monster." Honestly, while Sunny couldn't even imagine what type of terrible creature guarded the hidden statue, he was almost excited to find out.